A massive setback in the search for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. U.S. Navy says the underwater pings are not from the plane's black boxes.
The ocean does not forget. For over a decade, Flight MH370 has rested in its depths, beyond reach, beyond explanation. But satellites did see something. Fragments scattered like clues across the water. For years, these images slept, untouched, their meaning concealed. Now, artificial intelligence is awakening them, sharpening shadows into shapes, patterns into answers. The question is no longer if the truth exists, but whether the world is ready to face it. On the night of March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 departed Kuala Lumpur bound for Beijing. The plane, a Boeing 777, carried 239 people from 14 different countries. Within less than an hour, the signal disappeared from civilian radar. No distress call, no emergency beacon, just silence. What followed was one of the most expensive and exhaustive searches in aviation history. Countries combined forces, scanning the Indian Ocean with satellites, sonar, and ships. Billions of dollars were poured into the hunt. Yet, year after year, the ocean gave back almost nothing. Only a handful of confirmed debris pieces washed ashore on remote islands. But even in those early days, satellites had recorded something strange. Scattered shapes drifting in the currents. Angular, rectangular, reflecting light in ways the sea usually does not. And yet these images, taken by powerful eyes orbiting above the Earth, were sidelined. Officials called them inconclusive, too vague, too costly to chase. For more than 10 years, they sat in digital archives, hidden from public view, forgotten by governments, ignored by the mainstream. Until now. Because artificial intelligence has returned to these same images, and what it sees is far harder to dismiss. But if the satellites had already captured the truth, why was it left buried for so long? The night began like any other. At 12:41 a.m., MH370 lifted off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Weather was clear, the flight path routine. At 1:19 a.m., the crew made their final words to air traffic control. "Good night, Malaysian 370." 2 minutes later, the plane vanished from civilian radar. For a moment, nothing seemed unusual. Flights pass from one airspace to another every minute. But when Beijing failed to make contact, questions began to spread. By 2:40 a.m., concern had turned into alarm. The aircraft was gone. Military radar later revealed a shocking twist. MH370 had not simply disappeared, it had changed course. A wide, deliberate turn westward, crossing back over Malaysia, heading out over the Andaman Sea. It flew on for hours, unseen, almost ghost-like, far from where anyone expected. By sunrise, the truth had become undeniable. One of the world's safest airliners had gone missing with 239 souls aboard. In the hours and days that followed, chaos rippled across continents. Families waited in crowded airports, staring at screens that offered no answers. Nations argued over radar data, search zones, and responsibility. And as the hours turned into days, the questions grew darker. Had it been a hijacking, a catastrophic failure, or something far stranger? Searches were launched across the Gulf of Thailand, the South China Sea, and eventually the vast emptiness of the southern Indian Ocean. Yet every search ship returned empty-handed. But satellites had seen something. Images that seemed, at first, like nothing more than ocean clutter. Yet some of those frames would later be described as metallic shapes drifting where no debris should be. So why weren't they taken seriously?
As search teams scoured the seas in March 2014, satellites high above the Earth had already done their silent work. Their lenses, designed to monitor oceans, weather, and even military movements, swept over the Indian Ocean in the days after MH370 vanished. What they recorded was chilling. Scattered across the dark waters were dozens of objects. Some were small and irregular, the kind of fragments one might dismiss as driftwood. But others were different. Sharp edges, rectangular forms, and reflections that didn't belong to the sea. The French Space Agency, the Chinese government, and even commercial providers like Digital Globe all captured these anomalies. Images showed clusters of floating objects, some aligned in unnatural ways, others shining with metallic brightness. In some frames there appeared to be long shapes, too straight, too angular, too rigid to be waves. At the time, independent analysts noticed. Aviation experts, journalists, and even armchair investigators pored over the data. Some declared it the breakthrough the world was waiting for. Could this be the wreckage of MH370 caught on camera only days after it went missing? But when these findings were handed to officials, the response was muted. Governments issued vague statements, noting the images were inconclusive. Search teams were told to focus elsewhere. In the chaos of the operation, the satellite photos slipped into obscurity. And so, while families begged for answers and the world searched thousands of miles in the wrong direction, satellites may have already captured the truth. Yet the world never acted. Why would such evidence be dismissed so quickly? And what forces were at play in burying it?
If satellites had already captured suspicious shapes in the water, why weren't they pursued? The answer lies in a web of politics, cost, and denial. At the time, officials faced enormous pressure. Dozens of countries, hundreds of ships and aircraft, and billions of dollars were being mobilized. Every lead was expensive, every wrong turn humiliating. Chasing faint images across the vast southern Indian Ocean risked burning resources without guarantees. But that was only part of the story. Some of the satellite frames were controlled by foreign governments. Sharing them openly could expose intelligence capabilities, the resolution of military satellites, the precision of their orbits. For nations already wary of one another, full transparency was not an option. Classified stamps were placed on files, access narrowed, and the images faded quietly into archives. Officials framed the decision as practical. The objects were too blurry, too uncertain. They could be shadows, waves, even digital noise. Search teams were directed elsewhere. Yet independent investigators disagreed. They argued that several frames showed unnatural geometry, lines and angles rarely formed by the ocean. They pressed for action, but their voices were drowned out by official statements calling the data inconclusive. To the public, the narrative became simple. The photos meant nothing. But to those who had studied them closely, a darker suspicion grew. Had vital evidence been sidelined because it was inconvenient? Or worse, because revealing it would have forced uncomfortable questions about what really happened to MH370. For nearly a decade, those doubts simmered in silence until new technology cracked the archives wide open. Because when artificial intelligence returned to those very same images, what it uncovered could no longer be dismissed as ocean clutter. For years, the satellite images sat untouched, locked away as digital relics of a failed investigation. To the human eye, they were unimpressive, blurred shapes adrift on endless waves, undistinguishable from shadows or sea foam. But technology does not stand still. By the late 2010s, artificial intelligence had entered the global stage. Algorithms designed to scan medical scans, track enemy drones, and process astronomical data were now capable of something extraordinary:
detecting patterns hidden inside noise. What people dismissed as meaningless smudges, machines could evaluate in milliseconds. Independent researchers decided to test it. They fed the 2014 satellite photos into AI systems trained to separate man-made debris from natural clutter. What came back was astonishing. The AI flagged dozens of images as containing suspicious objects, not random curves, but sharp angles and straight lines, the hallmarks of engineering. Some reflected light in ways consistent with metal. Others displayed rectangular outlines too precise to be driftwood or plastic waste. Using enhancement techniques, the AI sharpened those blurry edges. Panels emerged, fragments resembling fuselage sections, maybe even parts of a wing. Shapes that, in hindsight, looked painfully familiar. For families who had endured silence for almost a decade, this was both vindication and heartbreak. The evidence seemed to confirm what many had argued from the start. The clues were always there. They had just been ignored. But the revelation raised deeper questions. If AI could uncover these details in 2023, then why weren't they acted on in 2014? How many answers had been lost to waves and currents while officials turned away? The photos were no longer static images. They had become evidence, and evidence demands pursuit. And when quantum-powered simulations entered the equation, the investigation's direction shifted again.
If AI could reveal shapes hidden in grainy satellite photos, the next challenge was geography. Where exactly had those fragments come from? In the early days of the search, investigators had relied on basic drift models, estimates of how currents and winds might scatter wreckage across the Indian Ocean. But the ocean is not a pond. It is a dynamic system of gyres, eddies, and shifting flows. Even the best estimates often proved unreliable. Debris fields predicted to stay clustered could disperse across thousands of miles within weeks. Enter quantum computing. Unlike traditional computers, quantum machines can process vast numbers of variables at once. Applied to ocean drift, this meant running billions of simulations simultaneously, accounting for wind speed, temperature, seasonal currents, and even wave height. For the first time, researchers could map where debris most likely originated, not just where it drifted. The results were striking. Again and again, simulations traced the flagged debris back to a region of the southern Indian Ocean, close to the official 7th arc, yet slightly north of where most searches had concentrated. It was a haunting conclusion. For nearly a decade, ships and sonar had scoured the wrong patch of ocean. The wreckage, according to AI and quantum models, might have been lying just beyond their reach the entire time. Skeptics warned of overconfidence. Models can only predict, not prove. But for families and investigators, the convergence of evidence was too consistent to ignore. For the first time since 2014, the trail seemed warm again. And as the story resurfaced, so did the emotions of the families, torn between hope, anger, and the painful reminder of years lost to silence. For the families of the 239 souls lost aboard MH370, every headline is a wound that never fully heals. When AI researchers released enhanced satellite imagery showing what looked like aircraft wreckage adrift in 2014, reactions were visceral. Some relatives stared at the images for hours, whispering that they could almost see their loved one's final resting place. Others recoiled, angry that such evidence had been kept from them for more than a decade. "We were told nothing was there," one grieving parent confessed. "Now we learn the truth was blurred out, hidden in plain sight. How do we trust them again?" For years, families had clung to debris discoveries. A flaperon in Reunion, cabin panels in Mozambique, scraps in Madagascar. Each fragment both a confirmation and a torment. The new AI revelations suggested that officials might have had stronger leads all along, yet hesitate to act. Support groups across Malaysia, China, and Australia reignited their campaigns. They demanded transparency, full release of satellite archives, and a renewed search. For many, the issue was no longer just about finding the plane, but about accountability. And yet, beneath the anger, there was something else. Hope. If AI could uncover debris patterns, if quantum models could point to new search zones, then maybe, just maybe, MH370 could finally be found. For families, closure was no longer a fantasy but a possibility, the one tinged with the bitterness of years wasted. As one widow put it, we don't want conspiracy theories, we don't want politics, we just want the truth. And if machines can help deliver it, let them. But truth, as history shows, is never simple, especially when nations and secrets are involved. Why were the satellite photos of MH370 blurred, locked away, or dismissed for years? The answer may lie not only in aviation, but also in geopolitics.
The Indian Ocean, where most experts believe MH370 ended its flight, is one of the most heavily monitored regions on Earth. It sits at the crossroads of Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Military satellites from the United States, China, Australia, and even private firms scan these waters daily, tracking submarines, naval fleets, and missile tests. Releasing raw images from those satellites could expose far more than wreckage. It could reveal the locations of spy satellites, the resolutions of their lenses, and even the movements of naval assets on sensitive patrols. To intelligence agencies, protecting those secrets may have outweighed solving a tragedy. Some analysts believe this is why officials were so reluctant to act on the blurred photos. If the images had been unredacted, they might have revealed classified operations, including naval exercises that coincided with MH370's disappearance. In other words, revealing the truth about one mystery might have risked exposing another. China and the US, already locked in strategic rivalry, may have also calculated that any admission of missed evidence would damage their credibility. After all, if powerful nations with the world's most advanced surveillance systems couldn't locate a missing jet, what did that say about their control of the seas and skies? And so, secrecy became the easier choice. But now, AI is dismantling those barriers. Algorithms trained on declassified archives are dragging blurred pixels back into clarity, pulling shadows into focus. What once could be hidden under the veil of classified is being cracked open, piece by piece. The question now is, how far will governments go to keep the final secret buried? The release of enhanced satellite images has done more than reignite debate. It has reopened the search itself. AI is no longer just a tool for enhancing blurred photos. Today, machine learning systems are sifting through terabytes of oceanic data, current maps, and debris drift models with a precision no human team could match. Where earlier searches relied on manual interpretation and limited computer modeling, AI can now simulate millions of possible crash scenarios in hours, narrowing down the most likely final location of MH370. By cross-referencing debris discoveries with satellite patterns, it builds a digital map of the plane's tragic last journey. One project, spearheaded by independent researchers, uses neural networks trained on wave and wind data to trace the possible paths of floating wreckage. The results point consistently to the remote southern Indian Ocean, but in zones that were either missed or dismissed in previous searches. Meanwhile, private tech firms have begun experimenting with AI-powered underwater drones. These machines can scan the ocean floor, identify metallic anomalies, and send real-time alerts, all without human divers. In theory, they could scour vast areas once thought impossible to cover. And yet, as powerful as these tools are, they face the same haunting question. Will governments allow them to search freely? Families of the victims see AI as their last, best hope for closure. But officials, wary of what else these technologies might uncover, remain cautious.
Some experts even warned that the truth, if revealed, could destabilize trust in international aviation forever. Which leaves us with a chilling dilemma. Will AI finally uncover the wreckage of MH370, or will it too be silenced by forces far greater than technology itself? For more than a decade, MH370 has haunted the modern world. It is not just the story of a vanished jetliner. It is the story of hidden truths, blurred evidence, and a race between secrecy and technology. AI has given us glimpses into what may have been there all along. Fragments of wreckage hidden in satellite images, overlooked debris trails, and patterns in the ocean that whisper of a final resting place. With each pixel sharpened, the illusion of not knowing collapses further. But the deeper we look, the more unsettling the question becomes. Was MH370 lost because it was impossible to find, or because someone never wanted it found? Governments continue to guard their archives. Intelligence agencies insist on secrecy. Families demand answers. And now, AI, a machine without emotion, without bias, is forcing the truth into the open. But truth itself is dangerous. If new searches succeed, they may expose not only the wreckage of a plane, but also the machinery of global surveillance, military rivalries, and human failure that kept the mystery alive for so long. The search is no longer only about finding MH370. It is about testing whether technology can outpace politics, whether transparency can overcome power. And as the latest AI-enhanced images circulate, sharper, clearer, and harder to deny, the world is left with one final question. When the wreckage is finally found, will the truth bring peace, or will it reveal something far more explosive than we ever imagined? The answer is still out there, somewhere beneath the waves.